I've spent 3 months with the S23 Ultra, and this is my final verdict when it comes to this phone versus this phone, because I know you lot love this stuff. There's one thing us YouTubers crave, which is engagement in the comments section. We want you to talk, make friends maybe, argue, and just have a bit of a laugh. Some good-natured bants, as they call it. One of the best ways to make this happen is to compare the S23 Ultra against the iPhone 14 Pro Max. And Samsung fans love it when an Apple fanboy, like myself, gives his opinion on the latest S series phone. I've used this long enough now to realise that it is actually better than the iPhone, and in this video I'm going to explain why, and I'm going to do that after I speak about this week's sponsor, because I know lots of iPhone fans will be watching this video as well, and for those people you are going to love the Keisaku Magic Stand for the iPhone. And yes, it's a fantastic case in its own right. It only adds 2mm of thickness to your iPhone, which is fantastic. It's very well designed. There's lots of different colours to choose from, including this rather fetching silver see-through version that I have here. But as you can see, it has this built-in stand, which means you can use it to prop up and watch stuff during your lunch break, to put on the floor and do gym workouts, which I don't do, I just do it for this sponsor read. It's one of those things that you don't know you need until you try it. And if you're wondering, MagSafe accessories still work with this thanks to the 48-piece magnet structure built into here. But the best news is I've worked with Keisaku to get you a 10% discount, and they now accept Klarna as a payment method. So to find out more about the Magic Stand case for the iPhone, just click that link. This won't actually take that long. I'm going to rattle off the reasons that I think the S23 Ultra is better than the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and all I want you to do is jump into the comments after each one and tell me if A, I'm an idiot, or B, I'm correct. Reason number one is that the battery life on the S23 Ultra is absolutely bonkers. Now, if you know me, you know that I don't do detailed battery tests, but this lasts forever, and according to One UI, at the moment, a full charge will last me 3 days and 22 hours. That sounds a bit optimistic, but given how little battery this sips on standby, it's probably not that far off. And trust me, compared to the iPhone 14 Pro Max, which compared to the iPhone 13 Pro Max just isn't as good when it comes to the battery, this absolutely smashes the iPhone. The second thing is the design, and I just think that the S23 Ultra is a much more handsome phone. The iPhone 14 Pro Max looks premium. I don't recommend getting it in deep purple because I only did that because of the band, which was a stupid idea. It's a very boring colour, but it's just, I don't know, I prefer this. This looks better than this, don't you think? I'm more in love with the design on the S23 Ultra than I am the iPhone, and it's also something about the way that it curves around. It doesn't curve quite as much as the S22 Ultra, but it's got more of a curve to make it more pleasing to hold. And for some reason, even though it is pretty much the same size, it's actually a bit taller than the iPhone, it feels less cumbersome in my pocket. I don't know why, it just does. Number 3 is the pricing strategy, and Samsung seems to discount pretty much everything. As soon as they launch a new S whatever, you can get it for much cheaper than the RRP, whereas with, well, Apple just doesn't discount anything ever. They do offer you a trade-in deal, but it's never as generous as Samsung's, and these phones are getting more and more expensive, and as tech gets more impressive elsewhere, dare I mention AI, and we can get really cheap or even free tools that do things that are just mind-bending. Spending nearly £2,000 on a smartphone gets a bit, it's a bit rich, literally. So the fact that Samsung does make it a bit more tempting to buy its flagship smartphone is a big plus point for them. And the fact they give such a good trade-in discount does pretty much lock you in, actually. I think it's more tempting to upgrade to the latest Samsung each year than it is the latest iPhone. Number 4 is Samsung's willingness to be different. Now, I normally throw a bit of shade at the S Pen, or the Spen as a lot of people call it, during these reviews, but I'm not going to today because I don't really feel like troll baiting, sorry. It is still a bit gimmicky. It's there. It's a stylus. It's the one thing that Steve Jobs said would never happen to an iPhone, and I can't ever see an iPhone coming with one of these. So the fact that Samsung offers that with the S23 Ultra, whether you need it or not, is just interesting. It's different, and like the presence of phones like the Fold, which, okay, it's an acquired taste and very expensive, again, it exists. It's Samsung being interesting and different. The iPhone is getting stale. I'm sorry. I've lost where we are with these now, but the next thing is Android, or more specifically, One UI. And One UI is Samsung's version of Android, which thankfully these days they don't butcher. It's just a bit more interesting to use than iOS. If you've used iOS for a long time, like I have, you'll know that it hasn't really changed for years and years. Yes, we've got a new lock screen now that you can customize a bit more. We get widgets, which is quite nice, but it's still this wall of app icons, which is just starting to feel a bit archaic. I don't think Apple has got notifications right either. Notifications on the S23 Ultra and Android in general are just much easier to use. They make much more sense. The only thing that iOS has going for it really is the Apple ecosystem, which I am completely welded to, but also the fact that for some reason developers seem to favor iOS over Android. So if you compare an iOS app to a Android app from the same developer, generally speaking, it's a better experience on this phone. But that isn't the fault of the S23 Ultra or Android. This is still a better experience overall when it comes to the OS. Next up is the display, which I think on the S23 Ultra is the best on the market. I can't get it across on this video, but trust me, it is just absolutely beautiful. It's really sharp, really vibrant, and I think one of the biggest things it's got going for it is this, which is the pinhole camera. There's no Monkey Island, there's no cutout at the top, it's just this massive expansive display. And if you're wondering, the fingerprint reader, which is hidden behind here, works brilliantly. The display on the S23 Ultra is one of the main reasons I keep coming back to this phone. The eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that I haven't spoken about the camera system yet, and that's because it's not that brilliant at times. Don't get me wrong, it takes some beautiful photos in the right conditions, but if you want to take a photo of, let's say, your child or your dog, it probably won't be sharp. And that's because of the slow shutter speed, and I don't care how often Samsung fans tell me to change 18 different settings and download this piece of software and whatever. It's just not as good as the iPhone when it comes to capturing relatively fast moving subjects. But if you don't mind taking a few photos just to get the right one, hopefully, then you can look past that possibly. But everything else that I've mentioned in this video makes this, I think, a better phone than this. And at the moment, the S23 Ultra is my favorite phone of 2023. The iPhone 15 is going to have to do some serious stuff to beat this, I'm afraid. But I would love to know what you think. Get involved in the comments if you haven't done already, and let me know your winner or the reason you would pick one of these over the other. And if you've still got some time, keep watching for a link to my final review of the iPhone 14 Pro Max.